Now, I know that it's Kentucky, so it's you get what you get type thing, especially if you have a small lawn or a small area to work with. Typically, we like to have our um, apple trees, pear trees up a little bit higher compared to like the valley, but you have what you have. Keep in mind if you have the soil type, what type of soil that you have. Um, if you have clay, how well is that going to grow? So kind of keep that in mind as you are starting to look for a location. Also, keep in mind that frost injury. So, um, especially if you ever look at having peaches or anything along those lines, peaches are not meant really for Kentucky. They're difficult to grow, but you can still get frost injury also on pears and apples. And it just depends on the year and the weather and what goes on with it. So just be cautious that there can be a frost. So whenever you are looking at your apples, there's all different kinds of varieties. And the apple that you choose, it needs to be cross-pollinated with another apple, or if you have a crab apple, you can do that as well. So it's best to go ahead and have those kind of set up. So really, if you have a good bloom and it blooms maybe mid time of the year, that's called the king bloom, and you want the largest one to kind of be in the center. So if you have one that is a really good pollinator and it can pollinate for several different kinds, that one is the one that you want to pick to be in the center so it can try to kind of pollinate everything. So you do want to make sure that whatever apples you want to pick, far as to go ahead and plant, that they are going to overlap in that green area. So if you're going to have Liberty, you want to make sure that you're going to stay also in that same category. You know, if you have a Liberty, you might not want to have a Rome as a way for it to bloom and have the cross pollination. So just look at your pollination. Some of them are not as well for others. Know that before, especially if you're ordering or if you're grafting, because it's not too much fun to have different times of blooms and not have any apples. So we get the question about apple trees. Um, how long can we expect them to live for? And it really just depends. Now I know that we have a lot of people that I have a tree that's 40 years old, and that is probably completely fine. If you're looking far as trying to have your tree produce, typically it takes at least 5 to 7 years in order to get an apple. Now, to get an apple doesn't necessarily mean that it's just going to grow and be right on. That's why we're having this today, is because it's going to take some maintenance. But typically for a semi-dwarf, you're looking at about 20 to 25 years. A lot of our rootstock is that type. And with rootstock, you're going to look at having, basically we have all our trees are grafted today. Any type of tree that you're looking at within a store, they're all grafted. A lot of them are grafted with that semi-dwarf. And you can look at how much it can typically, the yields can be within the tree. So standard is about 8 bushels, and then you get a little bit smaller as you go down. So if you look into like an apple orchard, of course, they're going to want the highest available. The semi-dwarf is pretty good for homeowners. You can still control it. It's a good rootstock, but you're going to have potentially as many issues as an orchard would. So you might not have to stake that tree. Rodents can be a huge problem. So I don't have, well, I do have deer on here. Rabbits can come up. Deer can be a big issue. Um, Deer like to eat, but they also can rub on the sides of the tree. So if you can put some type of wire cage around it, if you have to put some type of piping on, just so that they at least won't rub that area, that can help. You can see on the picture that it also has the wire cage. If you have problems with voles, you want to make sure to get that down into the ground, because those little guys can try to get up into that area and go ahead and eat. And you can see some of the damage that goes on with those. So go ahead and have a control in place, especially if you have rabbits, if you have voles or deer. So I think everybody probably has that, all of the above. But if you have it, and it's not close to your home, you're probably going to have more problems because you're not going to have, somebody outside near as often to scare deer, that type of thing. For disease and insect resistance, we have some diseases that are um, that cause more issues than others, but there are certain types of varieties that are more disease resistant compared to others. So apple scab is one of these that we'll talk about a little bit later, but there's some resistance depending on the variety that you select. So don't just go out and buy an apple tree because you know that it is a honey crisp and you really like to grow honey crisp. And know what the area is and what the disease and insect resistant is for that. We're going to hop back to our rootstock. So again, if you are looking to purchase trees or if you ever grafted, every tree that you will see is going to be grafted. Now, if it's a tree that's 40 years old and it's your great grandmother's, of course, it's probably not going to be grafted. But in today's time, we have all of our trees that will have a different rootstock. So the rootstock, the main ones for homeowners we look at is more along the size of the M7 and the M11. They have some really good qualities to these. If you're looking into a larger orchard or a more apple trees, there's some different rootstocks that can be better. But just because it is a semi-dwarf does not mean that the tree is going to stay semi-dwarf. You have to prune it to make it stay that way. So this just goes over some of the different aspects of apple rootstock. If you ever want to graft your own apple trees, especially maybe if you have an apple tree that is a relative's or it's been in the family and it's starting to get to the point that hey, it's no longer going to produce apples, it's starting to go downhill. Grafting can be a great way to kind of go ahead and have that tradition take on, and you can still have that tree, a portion of it. So if you're looking into that, you want to order rootstock extremely early. Contact your local extension office, see if they can help you in any way. Sometimes they do orders for rootstock, but a lot of times for our homeowners, for our classes, we do that M7 and M11. And that rootstock is going to help with diseases and help with things that we have problems with, such as woolly aphids. So if you're looking at, hey, I have a seed and I'm going to plant this from a Liberty, yes, it will grow, but you're not going to have the good rootstock that you would typically have that we apply now. So the rootstock that we have, if you allow that rootstock to grow, that's just going to be an apple, kind of like a crab apple, but probably even more sour. But you're going to have that good resistance against some of these diseases and insects. So I get that question, hey, I've got this growing in my backyard, but it just started. I mean, yeah, you can let it grow, see what happens. But we've had people, hey, I've done this before type thing. And they told us what happens is, that the tree blows over or there's a disease that comes in that really wipes out. So just keep that in mind if you're looking into grafting. These are a couple of different varieties, and some of them are more resistant than others. We'll go over some of these diseases, but these are probably some of the major diseases that we have going on. And if you have an apple tree, you're probably going to see this sometime or another, no matter how diligent you are. So some of these is, of course, powdery mildew. If you don't know what powdery mildew is, I'll show you a picture in a little bit, but it is one of those that looks like baby powder has been put onto the tree. Fire blight. Fire blight's one of those that it looks like the tip is dying out, but fire blight is it's bad in apples, and we can have some things to try to prevent it, but it's a lot worse in pears. So just keep that in mind. Cedar apple rust, we have cedar trees, so you're going to have that, and apple scab is just going to be there. So you have to find a way to try to prevent some of these things from happening. So if you can have a good variety that's more resistant, then that's definitely the way to go. So here's some of the different ones I'm talking about as far as diseases. I'll show you a publication in a little bit, but this one over here to the left, the fire blight, is one of the ones that is probably the most, you can see it very easily. So I'll have a picture, I think, in a little bit, but it's called a shepherd's hook. And right toward the end, you can start to see that the tip of it starts to die out and it starts to curl and it looks like a hook. And you can see that it's fire blight. You also can, I've got another picture coming up. You can actually dig into the wood a little bit and you can see the disease that it's actually browned some of that bark. Apple scab, of course, black rot. You will have those pieces of the older pieces of the apple tree that can actually stay on there and rot. You want to make sure to get all those off for sanitary reasons. We see those hanging out on trees right now. You want to get those out in the fall. If they start to die out, you start to have problems, you want to get those out. For our disease management, you're managing the disease. You're not going to be able to cure it. So you're not going to be able to take a step back, but you are going to try to prevent it from spreading to the rest of the tree or other trees. Apple cedar rust is, of course, one, and the frog leaf. We also have some insects. So our publication also goes over this, but some of these are a little more difficult to see, and you're like, what is going on with this? If you do not have a good control method, a good spray schedule, I would say, then you're going to have problems with insects and diseases. And we'll go over a little bit later, but there's another thing that you can really do to kind of help with that. But it's bagging the apples. But if you are looking at, you've got a couple, 4 or 5 apple or pear trees, then you really do have to have a schedule put in place. If not, you will have small fruit that will have disease and insects. And it just depends on what it is. Aphids, they're really difficult to see. You can see them up here in the right-hand corner. They're that little teeny dot. And whatever insecticide you put on, just keep in mind to follow, of course, follow the label, but look at the label and see if it's going to actually kill the insect. Because aphids is one of those that the bug will crawl underneath the leaf and they will suck basically the juices out of it, and you'll start to see it curl and it doesn't look as good. If we try to put, for example, 7 on, it's not going to do anything because that 7 is a powder that's going on to the top, and you have the aphids underneath. So they're living on and still living their best life. So these are just some of the major ones that can be a problem, but if we set out a good schedule, we can go ahead and prevent some of these. Hopping back to the fire blight, I wanted to show you this picture. You can actually look and see some of it. I'm not sure if you can actually see over here to the left-hand side, but we have some of those shepherd hooks, and it looks just like at the very tip it starts to curl down. But if you go all the way over to the right, you can actually take your knife and kind of score that back, and you can see that it has a brown spot into this. And this is when we start to see that, hey, this portion is starting to die out and we've got some disease. And in this case, we want to cut this out. So we'll talk about pruning in a little bit, but we want to try to get this out when it's dormant. So we're going to look at our fruit spray guide. So if you don't have the spray guide and you want to actually have apples or pears, you really have to follow it. And I think that the easiest thing to do is to have one of these available. So I'll go over one of them, the full process, in a few minutes. But just keep in mind, you want to spray early, and also keep in mind those major things that you're having problems with, such as the scab, cedar apple rust. You're also going to have fire blight no matter what. So keep that in mind. And what am I going to spray and when? Because it's not that I can spray one time and walk away. It's that I'm going to have to keep an eye on my orchard and know what is coming and how to prevent it from taking over. So we do have this great guide here. You can get it at your local extension office. It's a scouting guide. And I love this publication because it has pictures, and sometimes it's hard to tell, is this a disease, is this an insect? But I love that it has the pictures in it, and you can kind of walk yourself through the process and say, oh, wait a minute. I actually do have fire blight, or I have an insect problem. And of course, if you don't know the answer, you can always go to your extension office, and we're happy to help you in any way and try to get you the answers that you may need. So this is just another good publication. So this is for apples and pears. So a lot of this is going to be relatable for apple and pear both. And this goes over the practices that you will need. So I'm going to flip to the next page here. So we're going to start off in February, early March, and you're thinking like, hey, it's winter. What am I going to do in this case? In this case, you're already looking at fire blight. You're trying to prevent that fire blight from spreading. So copper is a good chemical management to help prevent that. And you want to go ahead and put that on before the buds start to swell. So that's going to be more like the dormant range. But you also want to have culture management. Don't go out there and just take a spray and continually spray. You want to have that management. So pick up any of those mummies. So the mummies are the little black fruits that started to rot, or maybe they was forgot about. You do want to have a good pruning system as well. If you go through and you do not prune your apple trees, your apples are going to be small, your pears are going to be small, but also you're going to have more diseases and insect problems because you cannot get in there to spray. And you're going to have kind of like an area that is able to host more of those insects and diseases because it cannot let the air breathe through. So throughout, you're going to be able to look at your target and look at the growth stage, and you're going to spray based upon the schedule. So fire blight, for example, is one that you have to consistently fight with. So we're going to start out in that February time frame, and then we're going to look at March. Check on your label and see how often you can apply it. It will tell you, every 14 days or every 7 days, whatever the case may be. And if you know you have fire blight in the area, you probably want to do it as often as the label will allow you to. Because fire blight is one of those, it's around, it's going to happen. And probably just like a lot of these others. But some of these here, the ones with the asterisk, are the ones that are organic. So keep that in mind if you're wanting to go organic. There are things that you can do out there and still be organic. If you're looking at a larger orchard, of course, it would be more difficult. But have your schedule in place, print this off, and remember to go through and start off with those cultural practices, and then look at your targeted, what am I needing to spray for, and go ahead and get that sprayed. So this goes all the way until you get to the harvest point. So scab is one of those that it's kind of like a little insect that lays on the bark. And you can't really see it that well, but once you do see it, you know that you have it. It's not a bug that crawls and gets away and moves really fast. It's actually almost like stuck on the bark. But it can take some of those nutrients away, and it can cause problems because they can take over a plant if you're not careful. So keep in mind, you want to go from that all the way from the February, March timeframe until after harvest. So you're not going to be able to just plant your tree and walk away. You have to have your system set up for, I'm going to spray. One of the ones that I hate the most is the Japanese beetle. So if you do not know what a Japanese beetle is, you most definitely will once you get your apple tree started. They love to get on the fruit and also on the leaves. They will take a leaf and just make it into a skeleton. So if you don't control that, you're going to have a tree that looks pretty weak. And that's one of those that you have to put 7 on, is for one of those that will kill it. But, if you have a rain or anything like that, you look back at your label, but you're probably going to have to reapply. And of course, it's Kentucky, so we have rain all the time. So if you're planting, you want to make sure that it's not too wet. You want a larger hole. A lot of times we get people, and I'm guilty of this too. We want to dig just enough to get it in the ground, and we want to hurry up and put it in and walk off. But you do need a larger area. Make sure that the hole's bigger than what it actually needs to be so that the roots can expand out. And you want to make sure not to put fertilizer in the bottom of the hole. We don't want to burn those roots up. So if you're looking at, I'm going to hop back for just a second. For our tree planting, of course, we do want to take a soil sample. A lot of times, if you have it, for example, in your lawn, if you fertilize your lawn, typically, if you fertilize the tree, it's enough to be for your apple tree if you're doing this small scale. But if you don't look at your lawn, you don't take soil samples, it's just kind of there. You do want to take a soil sample and see what's going on and what nutrients you need. If you don't have the right pH, then the plant cannot take up the nutrients that it needs. So keep that in mind. Every county is kind of different, but we do have soil samples available that you can take and send that off to our lab, and it's going to tell you exactly what your plant needs. Now that we have our plants, we're looking at, okay, I got my plant, and this is where we kind of fall back, where we get lost at, because we got it in the ground. Okay, we've got our sprays going, and maybe as time goes on, we have a tree that's kind of overgrown. So you do have to prune. You don't want to let your tree get out of control. First off, you want it to be manageable in size. If you do not prune your tree, it's going to not be a quote dwarf. It's going to be much larger. So you have to keep it pruned back. Also, you can have it where it's going to be structurally stronger as well. And you have to have some good, strong branches for some of these apples. Also, another reason is going to be for your disease. So you can take out some of this diseased wood. Anytime that you prune, you're going to want to at least go 6 to 8 inches back from where that disease is and cut farther back from that. So if you see it and you're really close, you don't want to be right on top of the disease. You want to go further back from it so that you can cut that out and hopefully take care of some of these issues. So when to prune? Typically, we want to prune in when it's dormant. So we want to do this. It depends. Typically, you can do this with apples about February timeframe. You can start in January, but you don't really want to go any later than probably what it is right now. So the reason for that is I would probably stick within the February timeframe because it's going to start to bloom. And when things start to kind of bud out and they start to get green, that's also when the disease is active. And if the disease is active, then you're out there with your pruners, you're cutting it, you're going to the next thing and you're cutting it. Chances are you're going to spread it from one place to another. So make sure to sanitize your tools, but also prune when it's dormant so you're not spreading it from one location to another. So in this case, if you have an area that you have a low branch, of course you can prune that any time of year. But for the pruning that you need to take place for the apple or the pear trees to grow, a good pear or apple, you're going to do that when it's dormant. So there's different types of pruning systems. Not one thing fits everything. Okay, so our central leader is going to be for our apple trees. It's going to be mainly that main shot up. We have a good few scaffolds going around. And then we're going to keep it manageable. Our modified leader system is going to be for our pears. So you can see here, it's got one main system, but you can see it toward the top, it kind of starts to shoot out and you have not just one main branch, but you have multiple. Now, I'm going to look at this other one. It's the open center or the V shape. The V shape is strictly going to be for our our peaches. So peaches have to have really heavy pruning, and I know we're not focusing on that, but a peach tree is pruned completely different than an apple or a pear. And we have different types of cuts. So we have a thinning out cut. You can see that there on the left, and then a heading back. So thinning out is where you're taking some of those shoots off of there, some of that growth. If you would do a heading back, then that is telling the plant, hey, I need to grow. So if you have an area and you're trying to have that branch kind of expand outward, you can do a heading cut and take that back a little bit. And that will say, hey, I need to actually grow in this direction. A lot of the cuts that I personally make are the thinning out. So this is something I think everybody struggles with is pruning. And it's not only when should I prune, but how do I prune this from year to year? So next year, once you have your plant established, let's say that you have your grafted apple tree, you had the class this year, and next year you're going to want to go ahead and cut back the top of that. So we're wanting to keep this apple tree short so that it's manageable. The next year, you're going to look at basically some of those heading back so that your plant starts to become a little bit more bushier. And you're going to continue that for the third year. Just be careful. You just want to have some of these main ones kind of growing out. You don't want to go crazy with it and just do heading backs. You want to do some thinning as well. So if we look at our 1-year-old trees, we're going to look at cutting anything that's lower than 18 inches off of it. So if it's 18 inches or below on the ground, cut those off. We don't want to be fighting with the weed eater or the lawnmower. You want to have some type of mulch around there. You don't want to have to fight with it. Also, you want to clip out any of those narrow branches. So you're going to have some good scaffolding branches, about 4. So if you think about like a level going up, you start at the bottom and you go up about that 18 inches, you're going to look at where am I going to have these good strong branches. And if you notice that some of them are really not good branches, that they're really tight, that maybe something straight up and down, we're going to go ahead and prune that off because that's not going to be a good branch for us. So once you get into these older trees, you want to have areas that you prune out are going to be some of these narrow branches, and that's going to help with the overall growth. Anything that rubs together. So if you notice that even right now, so if it's dormant now, you can start to see that the tree branches are rubbing together. You need to prune that area out where they're not rubbing together. If you notice that it's extremely like the center of your tree is extremely compacted, it has a lot of growth going on or a lot of shoots growing, you don't really want anything growing inside. You want to get some of those growing out. Also, anything that shoots straight up. So once you start pruning your apple tree, it will send off these basically almost like suckers, but it will send off this and it will say like, hey, my tree is active, and it will do this in the winter, and you'll start to see that there's a lot of growth. That's a good thing, but you're also going to have to clip those out because you don't need all of that wood. So anything that sticks straight up, anything that's weak looking, anything that has that branch that looks like this, you can see the weak one. We're going to go ahead and clip that and get those off. Now you want to be careful with this pruning, because keep in mind, you want to make sure to have the right pruning method. And I don't think I have a picture here, but basically there's a way to prune, but you can cut underneath and you want to cut a portion of the limb, and then you go on top and you can cut. So if you're not careful, if you go to the top of your tree and you're just cutting a limb off straight, sometimes it can cause it to tear part of the tree off. You want to have it where it's nice and flat. You can see here on the picture to the left, someone just kind of cut that off, and that's a way for the tree to catch some of that rain and have more rotting problems. This is really what you want to look for, something that's nice and flesh. And I struggle with this. I always go back and I start to clip and I'm starting to prune everything, and I look back and I still have a stub. So I have to go back and redo it. But this is, you can see down here to the left bottom, you can see that it has some good healing growth going onto it. And that shows a good sign that that's what you really want. You don't need to put on any type of tar or anything to cover it. A lot of times we see this in commercials and things, but you don't need it for pruning. And then branch spreading. So this is an area that I personally struggle in as well. So if you have some of the branches and you're trying to make those scaffolding branches, you're trying to find some of those main ones, but you have some of them that are growing up in a different angle, you can actually put in a limb spreading. You can spread those limbs out and have it where you can make those trained the way that you want them to be. So this is really needed in some of your trees. You're not going to have scaffolding branches and it's not going to grow perfect. You're going to have to probably do some type of spreading in order to get the limbs that you want. And the spreading usually takes place. Um, you can do this dormant May time frame, um, but you're not going to keep it in there forever. It's just enough for the branches to say, "Hey, okay, I'm gonna fall be in this direction that I need to be," and you can take them out after probably a few months. You want to look also at sprayers. So we're not going to get by with having a tree and not spraying, except we'll get to that point in just a minute. But if you are looking at spraying, you can either do like a hand sprayer. These are inexpensive. The thing is that they're a little bit more difficult to cover, to have good coverage because you're trying to spray that up into a tree and get into the center of that. But it's not a perfect method, but it's definitely can be done. And it's probably what a lot of people do in this area for smaller orchards or smaller amount of trees. But also you can have a mist blower. The mist blower, it provides really good coverage. But if you're looking to calibrate and see, how much of this do I need to put on, it's very difficult to calibrate. So I would suggest that if you're a small homeowner, keep the trees pruned back so that you can actually be able to reach your fruit, but also be able to spray. Because if you get to a tree and it's 15 foot tall, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to be able to control some of those diseases without being able to get up there to spray. But if you do want to go more organic, which we do have, there are organic ways, but if you're wanting not to spray near as much or not at all, you can actually bag them. Now, it's more of what they would call a hobby because it takes a lot of patience. So in this case, you can go through and you can actually bag up the fruit. You can thin these out at that time. So our apples and pears, we don't want it to be that our tree's overloaded. If your tree has a ton of apples and they're really small, it's because you have too many apples on it and it's focusing on putting all of its energy in those small apples. So we need to thin that out. Probably at least every 6 to 8 inches is what you're looking at. Um, just keep that in mind, especially if you are having problems with small apples or they're very tart and they're not supposed to be. So these bags, you can get them probably from any online source. Some of your extension offices might have them for examples, but also you can put on like a paper bag and you can put a slit into it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that you buy these online, but you're going to cover them when they're pretty small, about the size of a quarter. So when you bag these, it's going to help with a lot of diseases and insects. Basically, once you get these bags bagged, you don't have to spray for diseases. You don't have to spray for insects, but you do have to make sure, hey, that the windstorm came and I still have my bags on there. Or, if you have problems with a squirrel and it wants to come through and rip the bags off, things like that. And if you have a lot of apple trees, then you're going to say, hey, this is just not going to be possible in this case. But be careful if you do have like a brown paper bag, you can do this, but it will take out the color. And what I mean by that is you can see up here at the upper left-hand corner, sometimes if you have bags and they are not clear, like you see down here at the bottom, then the apple will taste the same, but it will not get that red pigment. So just be careful of that. It's not really anything that's going to be harmful. But if you ever want to sell apples or you're like, what the heck's going on with this? That's what's going on if you are bagging and you have a brown bag. For our pears, a lot of the diseases are going to be the same. But far as our varieties, again, we're going to go back to, we're going to look at what's suitable for our area and what can be in the area that's going to be maintained. So you do need a pollinator for this. You want to get your pollination chart and make sure that if you have them, that they are going to be able to cross-pollinate. So if you're wanting two different types of pear trees, make sure that they line up and that you do have a pollinator. And there is pear rootstock out there as well. I really don't do pear grafting, but you can. There's rootstock out there and available. Sometimes extension offices have them, um, but you can also, of course, purchase pear trees already grafted. This goes back to kind of the same thing we talked about with our apples. It's going to be the right location, the right place. We want to make sure to have a good area that has 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. And I know sometimes we get into areas where it's like, hey, I really, I've got this area and it's doesn't get as much sunlight, but this is all I have. You can plant there, but it's just your tree might not do as well, or you might have more diseases or insects because hey, the tree is not able to dry out as quickly as it should. And make sure you have enough space. So keep in mind where your electrical line is. I know that is one thing. People say, hey, it's nothing. Some of these trees can get large if you let them grow. So keep in mind, keep it away from the power or the electrical line, because the power company, they can come through and they can take out the tree and take it out completely. And that's their right to be able to do that. There's not much we can do about that. Make sure you have enough space as well. So I know with like container gardening for vegetables, we all get really excited and we want to plant things kind of close together because we're able to. But keep in mind, years down the road, how big is that tree going to be? And you don't want to get to the point that you have to cut one of them down because you don't have enough space. So if you're pruning a pear tree, you're going back to that multi-leader. And it goes back to, we have that main limb, but we're also, you can see in the pictures here, we don't just have that main one, we have a couple kind of going off of that. So you don't just have one, you maybe have like 3 of those leaders. So this is, some of them are thinning out and some of them could be heading back. It's the same concept. Anything that shoots straight up in the air, you're going to want to go ahead and get those out. Anything that looks weak or has that weak branch, we want to go ahead and get that out. Anything rubbing, go ahead and get those out as well. You want to have those strong main scaffoldings to get started with. So with your multi-leaders, you want to have at least 3 to 5 branches, and then you're going to go up, you're going to have some more branches off of that. So be careful with some of your younger trees. You want to prune those lightly. If you prune too heavy, then the tree is not going to produce like it should. Now, it's not going to probably hurt it as much 2 years down the road, but you will be able to tell, hey, this tree was producing last year. I didn't get near as many. Pears, look at the type of tree that it is, because sometimes pears, they and apples as well, they don't want to grow every season. Some of them grow typically every other season, but also we're pruning. Typically with your apples, pears, I would say keep it at the 15 to 20%. So you can cut back 15 to 20% of that tree, those limbs, and you'll still be okay. So you cut back some of those shoots that are going straight up, or if you have a big branch, you can cut a large branch off of that. But keep in mind, you don't want to prune too much off at one time. This really takes more case, especially if you have an older tree and you're trying to get it back into where it's going to be manageable. All right. So if you're pruning that more mature pear tree, we'll make sure to get out and use those thinning cuts. So the thinning cuts are going to take out the branches that we talked about earlier, the ones going straight up. You don't want to do the heading out because it's going to make it more bushy, and you want to focus more on the pears at that time. You're going to do more of the heavy pruning at the top because you want more light. Keep in mind that your tree needs good sunlight. It needs a lot of good airflow. That's going to help with your diseases and your insects. And make sure you do not give your tree a haircut. I know it looks like the easiest thing to do, but overall, pick those limbs and be able to do those thinning cuts to keep that measured back the way that you want it to. So you can kind of keep out you can cut one limb shorter than the other, and you can make that tree shorter. But keep that in mind that you don't want to do a complete haircut straight across. So if you haven't pruned your tree before, maybe you have an older tree, you want to make sure to go ahead and do that when it's dormant, and do that also to keep out your insects, your diseases. It helps get rid of some of these injuries. Overall, if you have apples or pears, yes, you can have a tree that grows and you can have apples and pears, but you will have better fruit if you take care of it, if you prune it, if you have a spray schedule, or have that where it's bagged. All right. Does anybody have any questions? I'll have.
Macy, I have a question. So I have mature apple trees and they did not produce fruit last year, not much fruit. What could be going on?
So some apple trees, and I would have to look up the varieties, but I believe some of these apple trees don't produce fruit every single year. Like they produce fruit, but one year you might have a really flush year and it's like, wow, this is amazing. And then the next year it might not be as much. So it might depend on the variety. Also, if you prune really heavy, then that can also be the reason why that you're not getting as many apples.
All right. Does anyone have any questions? You're welcome to come off of mute or you can put them in the chat box. Either way works.
Hey, April, we've got a question.
Okay.
Two mature apple trees that have been affected by the yellow belly sapsucker, so they've got the rings, the circles. Are they salvageable?
Can you hear
They've not
April?
been buried.
Can you repeat that for me, Rebecca?
She's got trees that's got yellow belly sapsucker damage all the way around.
Yeah. It probably depends on how bad the damage is, but in that case, you probably want to look at potentially, if that's a tree that you love, you probably want to look at grafting and looking at, starting another tree, because there's a reason that yellow belly sapsucker is there. It's going to look for insects. So kind of keep in mind, you can't reverse what's going on, but you can kind of start a different tree and kind of get things started for the future.
Yeah, so the yellow belly sapsucker is pretty much a secondary issue, probably, right, Macy?
Yes. So a lot of times we see them come in. There's probably something going on with the tree already. It might be an older tree, and you might have some, things that are not doing so well. Maybe it's, part of it's dying on the inside. You can't see it. A lot of times they'll go after some insects. So they're kind of telling you, hey, it's time to get a different tree. I know it's really annoying, but you can't really take it back. You just try to have another type. Basically, you take care of the tree. It gets to be in the stage that it can handle apples and different things. But once the tree gets older, if it's really old, that's probably the case. We see this a lot within orchards. It gets to that like 20, 30-year range. It's time to basically cut it down and have something else.
We got another one.
So how deep do the tree roots go in the soil?
How deep do the tree roots go in the soil, Macy?
Let's see. That's a good question. I would say you can probably, is it for grafted? Or is it ones that have been bought? Like the small grafted ones are larger.
I don't understand what you said. Why I'm asking is because I've got shallow bedrock soil, so that's why I'm asking.
So are you asking about planting, how deep to plant it, or how deep will the roots grow after it's planted?
After it's planted.
So how deep will the roots grow once it's planted? He's got shallow soils.
Well, I guess I would say that it's not really going to have a tap root. It's going to have more of those fibrous roots, so it's going to try to spread out so it can get more water. So it's not necessarily like going to go straight down. So he doesn't necessarily have a, you know, a good soil that is really loose. But um, I don't. I think in most cases, I thought I had it on here. You probably want at least, when you're planting, at least it's about 2.5 foot deep that you have good soil going on in that area. I know you got clay there, okay?
We did have one comment from Alan. He said, "Great job. It's like drinking from a fire hose."
Oh, it is, and I'm sorry. I hate to burst everyone's bubble. Let's
All right.
see. Is there a class for disease and insect management and pesticide handling management? You can check with your local extension office. I don't think that we do as an area. We do in Buffalo Trace. We just had our class. Is something that you want to look into next year. Contact your local extension office. But we have a class in Fleming County every year, and we do apple grafting. We talk about disease and insect control, and we go out and do the pruning. So it's something that you can, you're able to do that hands-on.
Macy, Carter County has a question, so they'll come back off of mute and ask.
I have a pear tree, and last fall, when they were ripening, there was this orange wasp that attacked the tree, kind of drilled a little hole in it, in the skin, and then took all the flesh out and just left this skin dangling. How do I control it when it's time to harvest?
So, when did it come on? Did it come on right before harvest, or was it kind of hanging around before?
What was that?
When did you notice it?
It was right when they were ripening. So it's
Ripening.
Yeah, when they
So
were ready.
we are still going to go back to that spray schedule. Are you wanting to spray, or are you wanting to try not to spray, try to do bags? What do you have in mind?
Well, they're pretty vicious. They stung me really bad. So I was hoping it was some sort of a spray that I might be able to use.
Yeah, there is. I'm not sure what the insect is. I would say take a picture, try your best without getting stung, and send it to Rebecca. She can identify it and make sure that it is on that spray schedule and it's just not something kind of funky and out there. But chances are it's on the spray schedule and you can spray that and it'll help protect your tree. And it, hopefully it'll help you not get stung too.
Did take a picture so I can show it to you.
Okay, great. I'll look at it in a minute.
Yeah, and the thing is too, in late, I guess kind of in the fall, the European hornet can be seen around fruit trees because that's when they're out foraging. I know I got a lot of calls about it last year, and I think even the year before. But you really have to locate, and I don't know if it's a wasp or a hornet what you're looking at, but it just brought up a good thought. You really need to locate where they are going to. So they just come out from their nest to forage, but you really have to locate where they're actually at. But they, I believe, if I remember correctly, they go away anyways when it gets cold. A lot of wasp and hornets do as well. But I know in that moment it's not nice, but they can be a nuisance as well. All right, we had another question here. Fred asked, do you plant 2 feet deep or only to the graft union?
That's a good question. So you want to probably, if you have a larger tree, basically you want to have a good amount of soil that you can dig and you have a good area, not like compaction, I would say. But I would say you want to keep that union above the soil, at least, 4 or 5 inches. So you want that union to grow and you don't want your rootstock to take over. So if you start to notice that the rootstock is starting to take over and maybe the union did not take place, chances are it didn't work, but you can keep that wood, the rootstock for next year and try to graft back on it. But keep that at least probably at least 5 inches from the soil because we want that to just be the top and we want the roots to be for the bottom. And sometimes they try to reverse each other and the rootstock tries to take over if you're not careful.
All right. Any other questions?
Do make sure if you ever look at grafting, you look at scion wood. That's the new growth from last year. It goes into this year. It's kind of a reddish color, but keep in mind all of our apple trees now are grafted. And that means that the bottom half, you get down to the bottom and you might have those little suckers kind of growing off. You want to clip those off and get rid of them. Don't use them for scion wood because that is actually your rootstock.
All right. I do not see any more questions currently. But if you do think of something after you get off of here this evening, again, like Macy said, feel free to reach out to your local county extension office. We're happy to help you out. And if you can't get a hold of them, just get with Macy, me, Rebecca, Kennedy, Emily, any of us agents that are on the Zoom this evening, and we can definitely help you out in some sort of fashion. If we can't answer it immediately, we can get with our wealth of knowledge on campus with our UK specialists. So we're happy to help. I will be sending out the recording of this later on. I can't promise it'll be this week. It's been a busy time currently. It's a busy time of year, so I'll try to get it out to everybody within the next couple of weeks so you have it as a resource to look back at. Also, I can send some of the publication links that Macy referenced throughout the presentation this evening to you all as well, so you'll have those readily available too. If there's no last comments, we will adjourn. Thank you all so much. Have a good one.